Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome. This is the post-secondary chat session, and I just want to welcome everybody here. It's good to see you. And I'm just going to start by introducing my colleagues here on the panel. And I'm just going to go starting from the right to me, introducing them. We have a few questions to ask that we have prepared, and I will be monitoring the chat. And I should introduce myself. My name is Meg Malone, as you can see from behind me. I'm the director of the Assessment and Evaluation Language Resource Center here at Georgetown University. And let me introduce my colleagues. I'm going to start, if you could wave when I introduce you. Ali Taha Brown from Georgetown. Selena Espacia from from Arizona State University. And Sarah Danielson from Minnesota State University. Okay, we're going to try to self-facilitate this as much as possible. So I'll call on one of the students in the panel to ask a question, and they'll call on another one. Our colleagues here may pass on a question. And if they want to talk, they're going to go like this. So that will remind me. So any questions before we get started? And for those of you out in internet land, you can type your questions in the chat. I will be monitoring it so that these wonderful language learners can focus on what they're saying and not on reading, talking, and listening all at the same time. So I'm going to start with the first question. What did you learn about yourself as a student and as a language learner in this spring's new learning environment? So I'm going to start with Ali.
Okay, just for some background, yeah, I'm a rising junior at Georgetown. I major in international politics and I minor in Chinese. And so this last year, I took second level Chinese 1 and 2 in the fall and spring. And I would say because of the pandemic, I took 30 to 40% of my classes online. And I think there was no real difference in my performance or focus level between the two mediums of learning. And I'd attribute that ability to maintain, in my eyes, high performance to my self-motivation. So I think that the biggest takeaway that I had as a student and language learner is that it is a cliche, but you do get what you put out of it. Because I feel like in college I have one option, which is to go to class and pay attention. But for a variety of reasons, whether it be like an online distraction or an in the house distraction. I think in online learning, you have two options, which is to pay attention and do the work, or be in the periphery of the class and sort of get by, like answer if you're called on, but not really be focused and invested in the learning. So I think that regardless of the format of learning or length of class, if you really want to learn a language or have the motivation to perform well in the class, then you will do the work required to achieve your goals. And just now, you were saying before we actually started this session that you're impressed and almost like really appreciative, definitely, of about how your colleagues have really invested in education over the pandemic, even though it's been the summer break. And I do feel like there is that sense of like we're facing something that we never faced before. And for me, at least, I was like the least that I can do to kind of get by and make it easier for everyone is to just try as hard as I was trying in person. So yeah, I would say that my biggest takeaway about myself as a student was that learning is a lot more about the student than I thought it was, because no matter how tough the environment that you're in, if you really do care about what you're learning about, then you'll find the time to put effort in every facet of the class. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I agree with quite a bit of what you said. I learned how resilient that I was as a student and a language learner, making such a drastic transition to learning a language online, far away from that immersive classroom environment that I was always used to, was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I learned how important it is to ask for help and for clarification, and everything that comes along with learning a language, and to really depend on my community. We were in class for about 2 months, and we made a good community in our class. So to depend on them and to help each other through it all was something that I learned to be really important. Yeah, do you have anything,
Okay.
Selena?
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys that definitely you have to put in the work that you want to get out. And I found not much really changed for me either, except the part of working with people. Like with the language, I feel I definitely need that pair work and that group work. So it was much better for me in my classes where we were a community and we could all type in the chat box and message each other while we were playing a game or something. Because I find that also took away the anxiety of being in an online classroom, because in Zoom you can like see everyone watching you when you're giving a presentation or something, and that's already like nervous enough when it's in another language. So I find those were the things that were different.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to move on to the next question. And I'm still monitoring the chat, so feel free, all of you in internet land, to send in some questions to us. Those were really, really inspiring responses. Thank you. What were you happy about in this spring's learning environment? And by contrast, what did you miss most in this spring's learning environment? And I'm going to start with Sarah.
So while I've learned through the years that I'm not the greatest online learner, I was very glad that my professor already had an established online classroom that we'd use if there was snow days, since I'm from the Midwest and we had quite a bit of those. So I really appreciated also that she took the time to teach us how the classroom worked online. She had a video, set everything up so that we were comfortable with learning online. It wasn't like a new feature to us, so that took that ease away from us. And then we also learned like what to expect from the technology, which is something that you're thinking about class, and then you're thinking about what if Zoom doesn't work today or things like that. So that added stress was really nice. That was taken away. And then I did really miss the community that I had in the classroom, but my professor did a really awesome job at creating a similar environment through our online platform. So you don't get to come to class every day and just have that chat with your friends and with your professor and just have that camaraderie. But I did really appreciate, and I was really happy about how she kind of still made that community and camaraderie aspect through our virtual classroom as well. Okay, Selena.
Yeah, I felt the same way, that definitely the thing I missed was the in-person contact and talking with our friends. So I definitely appreciated the pair work and the group work. And that's the thing I was most satisfied with, was the way teachers were so easily able to adapt, because in Arizona, we didn't have snow days. So all of my courses were in person and then like 100% online. It was quite an adjustment, but everyone was able to make up tests for us that we were able to do online, or give us extensions for papers and stuff. Everything worked out well that way.
And what did you miss the most?
What did I miss? Just being in, doing group work in persons and in person, and being able to explain concepts better. Like the teacher could go around, and if you have a question, they could explain it, draw it out for us easily. And I feel like on Zoom, that was quite a bit harder for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Ali?
Yeah, just echoing what you both said, I'd say that I missed just the classroom environment as a whole. I think in terms of, especially in language learning, like being able to speak your language with people, other people at a similar level to you, is vital in terms of progressing your learning. Because it's not like in other lecture classes where you can just sit down and take notes. In order to like really learn a language, you have to be able to practice it with someone else. So just to turn that, I was really happy that there was a sense of normality during online class. Like, I think it would have been really easy to just, like, there were lots of people. I know there are lots of like movements towards trying to give universal pass fail, and I understand that, and I understand the reasons for doing that. But I think there was a kind of people were willing, I would say, to, some people would be like willing to write off the semester. But I think that in terms of my experiences, everyone really rallied behind behind learning. My teacher put in so much effort to make sure that our content would be adaptable to online learning, And I just think that the best part about the adjustments the teachers made were just increased communications and discussions. I guess the plus of online learning, I mean, the plus of being in languages is that the class sizes are comparatively smaller. So it's easier to implement breakout rooms. I think that was a really important part of my adjustment, because I was still able to use the breakout rooms and discuss things with my peers. And I was really happy actually that even though there was no teacher supervision of my breakout rooms, we almost always stayed on topic, and there was no difference at all in the quality of discussions, I think, than in person.
Okay, so I'm going to veer from the questions I gave you because you've brought up some really interesting stuff and I want to dig a little deeper. So I think it was Sarah who talked about how your language instructor did a great job of creating a similar environment. Could you tell us a little bit more, each of you, about how your language instructors created an environment online that brought out the best of in person to create community in the classroom? I'll give you a minute to think about it.
So I know for mine, we would still kind of have that 5 minutes before while everyone's still logging on and getting situated. And she would just kind of, how's your day going? Let's just kind of chat for a little bit. Let's just have some normalcy. Let's just not get right into learning real quick. Let's just see how everyone's doing, first of all, since we've been apart for so long. So that was really nice, because usually when you come to class, you sit down, you just kind of hang out for a little bit. You just check on everyone, see how everyone's doing. So that's something that I really appreciated. And then kind of like Ali said, we also had breakout rooms. So that was also implementing some of that more group work, just peer collaboration, instead of just listening to a lecture the whole time. So I really appreciated stuff like that. And then in class, she always did a really great job about implementing things that were of interest to the students in the class. And that same thing translated over to online learning as well. Selena?
Thanks. Yeah, same within my classrooms. In person, we used to start off the class with like the teacher playing a song in French or Spanish, depending what class, and sometimes that's the way we would start our Zoom meetings too. And I definitely agree that there's been an increase of communication to help us feel more at ease and know all the ropes of how to use Zoom. And yeah, definitely the breakout rooms. I agree with that, Lee, that we always stayed on topics even without the supervision of the teacher. Ali?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. Speaking to more of what Sarah said about how your teacher at like a start of class asked everyone how they were doing. I think for my first two classes, I think it took a lot of time, but it was really important. My teacher had all of us give like a 3 to 5 minute just monologue on where we were in the world, how we were doing, like how our place in the world was coping with the COVID pandemic, what time it was, stuff like that, because that kind of gave me some perspective to start the online learning with. Like, it's not ideal. There will be obstacles no matter what. It's not gonna be the exact same as in person is, but the fact that everyone was on time in the Zoom call, ready to start, kind of made me realize that everyone's willing to try their best to go to work to make this work, and that's kind of inspiring, I think. And just more technically, my teacher, I think the key is just to keep as many people as possible engaged. So maybe during a lecture, I think my teacher found it useful.
Oh.
Keep starting meeting.
Sorry, could you just go back about 30 seconds? You said during lecture, my teacher, and then you faded out.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No.
So during lecture, my teacher, she was like giving a mini lecture. She would punctuate it by asking questions every now and then to certain members of the class, and that would keep them on their. And can you hear me still?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and also I think that there were some we do a mock test or something, a practice test, and have everyone in the chat write their answer in the chat, so people can't just get away with not raising their hand and not being involved. Like, everyone has to be engaged in learning.
Thanks. That's super helpful. I just wanted to follow up on another thing that you all mentioned, which was I was really interested in this. You kept saying everybody stayed on task when you were put into groups. Just thumbs up, thumbs down. Is that usual in your classes that people stay on task?
Sideways.
Yeah, as a professor, sometimes I come by and I hear something switching from let's go to the tombs to let's talk about blah, blah. So can you tell me a little bit about how you think professors can structure learning tasks to encourage students to stay on task? What were the things that you think motivated you and your colleagues to stay on task? Allie?
I think what's pretty interesting actually is that in an actual class, you're always sitting with the person that you know best in the class. So when you're brought into pairs, that's when it's easier to get off topic, because if you're with a friend, you can talk about how their day went and stuff like that. But with the breakout rooms, and at least from my experiences,
Okay. Yeah. Selena, why don't you go and Allie will fix his audio.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, yeah,
Oh, we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Did you hear me? I was talking about like the pairings being their friends.
Yeah, you said, and sometimes you sit next to your friends and you talk about your day, but when you go into these rooms and then you cut out.
Yeah, if you go into the rooms, that you're placed into random pairings, so like you're with people who you don't know as well, so it's harder to get off topic because you don't have much to talk about. So if the more you randomize it and put people with different people, the more that I think they'll just stay on topic and do what they're told to do. Otherwise, it would be more awkward for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing is the time limit that the teacher gives us, because we know we have a short amount of time to practice it, and we know the teacher can pop into our break room at any minute, our breakout room, whereas in person you can like see the teacher coming to you or not. Like, I'll get back. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just echo, honestly, the things that both of you said. So,
Great. Just building on this is so interesting to hear it from your perspective as opposed to the professor who's popping into groups. One of the things that that some of you talked about was how your instructors helped you deal with your anxiety about learning online, and also to bring up what Allie said about how at some institutions it was mandatory pass-fail, other institutions it was grades, others you got to pick. Others you got to pick after you got your final grade or before. So it was kind of all over the place. So how do you think, as instructors, we can help you first deal with your anxiety with online learning, and then your anxiety about being graded in this kind of wild new environment? I'll start with Selena.
Okay, I'm not sure about the grading, but for the anxiety part, I was in a course this summer where the teacher didn't require us to have our cameras on, and a lot of people just used the chat to talk. So that was nice, instead of having to turn on our microphone and camera and everyone can see us and listen. But I also found that was sometimes a problem too, because if the teacher would be like, any questions, you'd be like typing out your question, and by the time you formulated it, she's already on to the next topic, the whiteboard's erased. So I don't know, it's a tricky question.
Okay. Others?
Allie?
Sure. I just think in order, like, in terms of reducing anxiety and along those lines, I think the most important thing is just flexibility. And I think across the board, all my teachers are really good about understanding that these were different times, that sometimes, like, maybe being more relaxed in deadlines for certain homework assignments, if there is a valid reason, or projects, or if someone can't make a class and there's a test, letting them take it the next day. One class, I'm not sure if it will work for this coming semester because we are starting from scratch. But one class that I had last semester, the teacher said I can't like actually enforce this, but your grade, no matter what happens from here on, will not go down from what it was before the break. And that made me feel a lot more secure and able to go on with learning because it reduced the kind of grade pressure. But unfortunately, it's like ideally we'd all be learning to learn and not learn for a grade. But I think it's important to understand that for lots of people, they do enjoy the learning, but the objective is still the grade because that's what they're judged on at the end of the day. So I think it's really helpful for students to have clear, I guess, grade descriptions, and not only that, but in this current time, to have flexible grade descriptions and to get the benefit of the doubt more often than not.
Yeah, I agree with both of that. And I also think, like Ali said, flexibility is really important. And so is availability, like I mentioned earlier, for when students, sometimes it's easier to have a one-on-one conversation and be available to answer emails with questions and things like that. And I also think that it's really important to have the understanding that you're not going to be able to check on your students every day when they come to class. You don't see them as often, and when you do see them, you see maybe not even their face online, like Selena said. So sometimes it's kind of hard to tell even what your students are going through if you're not actually seeing them. And so I just think checking on your students is also really important, just to make sure, because it is an overwhelming time having class, everything just right online. So yeah, I think availability and understanding are really important.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate your honesty in that, because I can assure you as a professor, we were experiencing a lot of anxiety about both of those issues, technology and grading and being fair in the middle of a global pandemic and unprecedented times. So another thing that I wanted to ask you, you are all just bringing up such wonderful points. So you talked a lot about interpersonal communication using the chat feature, and then either with or without video on Zoom. What about other aspects of language learning? Like, so we talked a lot about speaking and a little bit about listening and a little bit about writing. What about more formal writing assignments? And what about learning to read in the language, getting reading assignments in the language? How did that go? Sarah?
The course that I was taking this past spring was a pretty reading intensive course for French. And so we had those 2 months where we were learning how to, read more formal novels in French, and then going online, it's a little bit difficult. It's a big jump to go off kind of on your own and be like, okay, now I have to read this whole book whilst also understanding the whole thing so I can talk about it in class. So that was the hard part, but I think our professor did a great job of coming to class also and being like, this is what we read, just kind of like going over it again. So it's like, I know you read this, and so let's kind of talk about it. Let's hash it out. What are your questions about what you read so you can understand kind of how that reading aspect is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Selena.
My French teacher, she gave us a reading assignment that we took home. We read it, then we came to class, we read it with a partner, and then we answered questions on it with a partner, and then we shared it as a class. And then for homework, we would actually have to do a write-up on that reading with a partner. So that's the way I was doing reading and formal writing.
Okay, so I need you to repeat that, because I bet everybody watching this is going to want to hear how you did this. So
okay.
Start again.
Okay, I'll go slow. Okay, so first of all, my teacher would assign a reading from the textbook that she would assign one night. Like Monday night, we would read it. And then Tuesday, we would read it with our partner. And so it would be a short passage, like 1 or 2 pages. And she would ask us questions on it, like maybe, are there any vocab words you don't know? Are there any phrases, stuff like that? And it was called lecture active, like active reading. And then we would do a write-up on that later with our partner, like One of the examples I can think of is we did a write-up on tourism. So it was talking about like, what's tourism in your country, or how can you be respectful as a tourist in other countries? And then we'd have to write a paragraph or an essay together on that and hand it in.
So like a 4-part assignment for one reading.
Yeah.
And you did some reading activities, some listening activities, some speaking activities, and some writing activities.
Yes.
Okay, I hope all you people in internet land are taking this down. And what did you think about that, Selena?
I really liked it because then again, talking it over with a partner reduces the anxiety, and you can see if you guys are on the same page, if you understand the same thing. And that way it gives me a second time to read it over and understand the French better.
Ali, how about you with reading and in online classes?
Yeah, sure. So the way that my semester was structured was that it was made up of 10 units, I'd say, 10 to 12 units. And for each unit, there would be 2 dictations and 1 like workbook assignment, which included an essay and reading components to it, and then a test at the end. And what my teacher did was she first of all made the dictations when we were doing it online. The dictations and workbook were just for completion. There was no grade involved, and that did reduce stress. That was a good thing because when you have like an assignment and like an assignment that counts for your grade every single day almost, it can get stressful because every little thing does count. So reducing that stress over Zoom, I think was a positive for all of us. Um, but I think one thing that she should have done, what she didn't do, is to make sure that make it mandatory that people, I guess, take pictures of their dictation and send it to her to make sure that everyone's actually doing it and not just kind of getting by without doing anything. But one thing that she did with that, I think was good, was that for workbook assignments, we'd always have one essay at the end to write, and she actually used she used this time as a time for us to improve our keyboard writing, because in person it's mainly just handwriting, but she would make every other workbook assignment be on the keyboard, because I think that's a more applicable skill to the future. And she was trying to get us to learn how to structure our writing more, because it's easier to type more when you're on the keyboard. And then for reading, it was mainly the same. We had like an online workbook, so we do reading comprehension off there. And I think one thing that was good was she would do like in class, have a reading passage during the lecture, and then she would ask us to answer questions in the chat, as I said before. So that kept everyone engaged too.
So Ali, you're bringing up a really interesting point about writing, because you were learning, I would guess, Chinese characters, right?
Yeah.
And Selena and Sarah, you were learning French, right?
Mm-hmm. And
So-
Spanish.
And Spanish. So the writing was a little, you already knew the alphabet. So
Yes.
Ali, could you I'd love to hear a little bit more about some strategies for, maybe some deeper strategies for not just writing, but learning to write in the language.
Yeah, sure. That was actually the biggest challenge that I think I thought that I was going to face beforehand, and I think I was right, was memorizing each character in every unit. So how it worked was we get a textbook unit for so like our textbook has 10 units, and we go through all of them in the semester. And in person, it was always easy, not easy, but I'd always memorize every single word in every unit, because our dictation encompassed every word. You could be tested in every word. But since dictation wasn't graded, and since you didn't have to provide any proof that showed that you could write the characters, I knew that it would be easy to slack off and not memorize every word. But I think that I just stuck to a schedule. I made sure that like this is what I was doing before. It was working for me, and so I just before every unit I would do this my same tactic of like covering up the word and writing it, and just making sure that after 5 to 10 repetitions I'd memorize it. And I think that again kind of goes to the point that um, like when it comes down to it, it is down to the student to put in the work to really master the content, because at the end of the day, no one can like come into our bedrooms and make us write the characters. Like it has to be from within.
Yeah, and as you know, a parent of kids who are learning online, I can tell you we don't want to be coming in and telling you to do those things. So we've covered a lot of topics. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the things you liked about how the chat feature worked? Some of you talked about how it meant that, you know, the good thing was that you could turn off your camera and show up with bedhead and nobody could see you, or perhaps all the dishes in your sink. But conversely, that sometimes the instructor moved on too fast because some, you know, most of us write more slowly than we talk. First of all, in what language or languages did the chat take place? And what do you think were some best practices in using the chats? Sarah.
So I know for my class, so I'm taking French. So for my class, we used the chat feature quite a bit. I mentioned that it was very reading heavy. So our professor would ask kind of a question like, what was going on in this chapter? What were like the main points of it? And it's very hard to, like in class, you would just shout them out and the professor would write them down on the board. But in Zoom, it's very hard to just shout out the answers all at one time. So that's kind of what we use the chat feature for. Everyone would just type out their thoughts and she would just read them and put them on the notes as she saw them come through. It's also very helpful when a question pops into your head, just quick type it in the chat feature and she'll get to it when she gets to it, but at least she sees it and you got it off your head so you don't forget it. Because I know that was a big thing in class where it's like, you said something and I have a question right now, otherwise I'm going to forget it. So that was really helpful that I could just type it quick and I know that she saw it and she would get to it when she needed to. So yeah, those were the things that I found most helpful with the chat feature. Selena.
Yes, I agree with you. You can write down a question and they can get back to you when they're done explaining their concept. I also found another thing my friends and I used the chat for was if we didn't understand the teacher, you could send like a private chat to someone to be like, wait, did I hear that right or something? And as well for games, we definitely used it for games and comprehension questions, like the teacher would write an equation or I guess in this case a phrase on the board and we'd write in the answer in the chat box. Or sometimes if someone's microphone wasn't working, it was obviously useful for that too. Or if we can't hear the teacher, something like, we can't hear you. Ali?
Yeah, building off what you said, Selena, one thing that I found was like a quite positive add-on to not just language learning classes, but every class that I had was that there was almost like a constant, like in the chat, like a discussion among the students and if and the TA as well, if they were there, about things that the students weren't sure about, so that the teacher could still talk and present, and students could listen, but they could also ask questions, and then other students could answer those questions. And that's really good because it not only does it help students learn if they don't understand the content, but also for those that do understand it, I think teaching it to other people is the best way to kind of solidify your own knowledge and clarify it in your own head.
And that reminds me actually another thing. Sometimes starting the lesson when everyone would come on, they'd be like, bonjour. And it was nice because that seemed to build the community too. When everyone's greeting each other, like saluting each other and saying goodbye at the end, it felt like we were all in person again in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I like that you're using, I mean, I think of chat as an approved way of passing notes in class about class.
Yeah.
Right.
The only downside I could say as a professor is you want to make sure that you're getting the right answer.
Yeah, exactly.
And,
For me, sometimes it was like my internet cut out. So I was like, wait, could you please repeat the last sentence he said? But then I did ask at the end too. Ask the professor.
yeah, so one of the things all of you brought up was asking for help. So I just want, maybe you could tell me a story. It doesn't have to be about you. It could be about one of your friends or your colleagues, a story about successful ways to ask for and get help in a virtual environment when office hours for professors are not held, in my case, Allie, at Lowinger in front of the coffee shop with my free coffee pass for students to help give them an incentive to come.
Yeah.
Selena?
For me, I felt my teachers were always willing to help. If you say like I have a question or I don't understand, could you repeat that? And they're always willing to go over it as many times as you need and make sure that you get it. I didn't have too many problems asking for help. Sarah?
So yeah, I mentioned that asking for help. It's it's one thing when you're in class and you just run up before class quick and ask a question and things like that. But when you're online and your whole class is there, some things just aren't relevant to ask in front of the whole class, and some things are more personal. But my professor did a really awesome job at making sure that we knew that she would be available for us, whether we needed to set up a Zoom, if we didn't want to have like an email conversation, or if we sent in an email, we knew that a response would be coming. We didn't have to wait days like I did with some other professors who would only do like once every 48 hours check their email. So I think that was really helpful was knowing that I was getting a response and it was coming. Because that's the worst thing is when you're trying to do something and you're just waiting and waiting for that response back. So that was something that I found really helpful. Yeah, Ali.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. One thing that I think was simple but also really effective was I kind of forgot if my language teacher did this, but for my other classes, a couple definitely did. And that was to say, if you have any questions, just stick around after the class and I'll be here for like 15 minutes after class just to answer any questions. And I think Zoom is pretty good because you can like press the button, raise hand, and you can ask a question that way. But I think it can be intimidating if you have a question that you think is basic or like not like, or you feel embarrassed about your question to ask in front of the whole class. So I think for teachers, just increasing the opportunities for one-on-one time is the best thing for that, because whether it be office hours or before and after class, that really helped me a lot.
Thank you. So I want to bring up something that is near and dear to both professors and students' hearts, which is getting feedback and effective ways to get feedback, especially when, I think different instructors use learning management. I always think they're called language management systems, but that's because I'm a linguist. They're really learning management systems. But how we use, I would say, what are some best practices and maybe some practices, obviously not any of your professors, but your friends' professors perhaps engaged in, to engage, to help students get good feedback on their language, and ways that you can use an LMS to get effective feedback on language. Go ahead, Ali.
You mean like getting feedback for like a student trying to get feedback on their own progress from their teacher, or a teacher getting progress on their teaching from?
Oh, well, let's talk about the students getting feedback from their teachers, and then let's talk about teachers getting feedback from y'all.
Okay. And from the student standpoint, I think for me, with learning Chinese, what helped me a lot was I would go to my teacher's office hours once a week, and we had these thing called Chinese tables that the school would run, which is like a bunch of students would just meet up in a common area and talk in Chinese for a certain period of time. And for me, it was just because tones are really important in Chinese and how you pronounce the word. Because if you pronounce it in a different tone, it's got a whole different meaning. So my teacher would have a note card in front of her, and whenever I mispronounced a word or a tone, she would write it down, and then at the end I could review all of the words that I missed. And then I think just like, in terms of both ways, like progress, I mean, getting feedback both ways, I think having trying to build a personal relationship with the students is really helpful, because that makes the student feel more invested in learning as well, because they want to as I think it's inspiring to see someone put effort into your own learning, and you want to reciprocate that and put effort into what they're teaching you as well. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Selena.
No problem. Yeah, I agree. I feel like my teachers also focused more on fluency than accuracy. I feel like they gave us more points for participation rather than having precision and accuracy in our language. I the only feedback I can really think of is when I gave presentations. Most of the feedback was like, okay, good ideas, just some grammar errors, but I didn't find a lot of like, oh, you need this, this, and this. That was my experience. Sarah?
Yeah, I think the most important thing, I guess, with learning a language is it's hard to move forward when you're not getting feedback on something that you keep missing. So it's hard to keep building on a foundation that is still you're still sort of rocky and like questioning. So something that's really helpful for me is just like is timely feedback. If I write a paper, it's hard to know if the next one that how to write another one when I don't know the mistakes on the other one.
Yeah.
But then just like understanding that if I haven't had that past feedback, that my next papers won't be as improved. Things like that. Because with anything, with any concept, it's hard to build on it when the foundation's rocky. So I think that's just with me in language learning, that's the best thing is just, especially even if it's like immediate. If I say something wrong in class, I'd rather be corrected right there so I don't keep saying it wrong and then get it stuck in my head that what I'm saying or the conjugation that I'm using or something is wrong. It's so much easier just to correct it right away before it gets into my head the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I love that. If it gets into your head the wrong way.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. So one of the things I do in my class that my students and my colleagues think I'm a little strange, but I do it anyway. I do weekly surveys of my students. I'm in testing, so I love getting feedback. I love data. So what questions would you like your teachers to ask you if they were getting feedback from you?
Wait, I don't understand the question. Like what feedback about their teaching?
Yeah. So what questions do you want them to ask you? And then what feedback do you want to provide to them? Because sometimes we ask questions and it's not the questions that our students want us to ask them. They want to tell us something different.
Oh, okay, I see.
Sarah?
I think something that's really important is just to ask, like, what can I do to better help you? Every student has a completely different learning style. And while the professor can be catering to quite a few learning styles in the classroom, there could be one student that's just like, I'm not grasping it because I like to learn this way. I think that's something, especially as an education major, I know is very important to know how all of your students learn because you need to cater to all of them. Even if it's just one student that learns in a different way, it's just important to reach all of the students. And then having a space just for comments. Because like you said, there sometimes on the surveys, students want to say something, but there isn't a question to prompt it. So I think just to have an area for comments about anything, it leaves it open-ended for the student to be able to let you know whatever's on their mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ali.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree, but I also think that almost the more important part isn't really the phrasing of the question. I think that the more important part is just like the buildup of the relationship between teacher and student. Because like I've had surveys where like with classes where it's almost like doing a survey was a chore. But I've also had surveys or classes where it's like I really did want to make my feelings known about the teacher, mostly in positive ways, because I felt that I like they helped me a lot in my journey, and I want to help them by giving them a good, thorough review. And so I think that so in some classes I've had this where it's like at the start of the semester, the teacher will give out kind of a personalized survey to every student about their own learning style, what they think will help them. And it's almost like the students placing trust in the teacher by telling them about themselves. And I also appreciate it when teachers talk about their own lives too, their own experience, why they enjoy teaching the language, and having that like it's having a more I keep saying about like personalized relationship can leave it I think leave a student more conducive to give honest feedback. I always think that I give my best comments on teacher surveys in the last box when it's like, do you have any other thoughts to express? Because like the words and questions used are often like similar wording or similar types of things they're hinting at. I think that the most accurate answers do lie in the space where it's just like, can you express what you think generally about the teacher? So I think it's more about what happens before the question than it is a question itself.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one question that you prepared for. You all are so quick on your feet or on your reactions, which was, given that it looks like we're going to have a blended, some face-to-face, some remote, some all remote learning environment in the fall, what advice do you have for your language instructors and your language programs under these circumstances? Selena.
All right, I wrote some stuff down, but I wrote it on my screen, so sorry if it looks like I'm looking off to the side a bit. But yeah, one of the things, I think I already mentioned this, but when students are giving presentations, it's nice if the other people have their cameras turned off, or if the students know they can like minimize it so they don't have to have everyone watching them. As well, sometimes though, I found that the Wi-Fi signal was slow, and one of my teachers, French teachers, actually recommended if everyone turns their camera off, sometimes that makes the Zoom have a better connection for everyone. As well, I probably already mentioned this too, but I like a lot of pair and group projects because that way you get to practice listening and speaking, reading and writing with a partner in my case. And plus I've been to Zoom lectures where the teacher is talking the whole time, and that was already so hard to listen to in person, but on Zoom it's so much harder when it's just straight up lecture, which I know doesn't happen very often in a language class anyway. And then, yeah, my other advice was allowing lots of time when the teachers ask, are there any questions? Let students think about their question, formulate it, and write it or say it. And then my last thing was having people use the chat box when we're playing games or something. Like sometimes people made competitive comments when we were playing like Kahoot or something, and it made it fun and exciting, and it was really engaging that way. Sarah.
Yeah, so learning a new language is really difficult from learning like in any other course that you could take, in my opinion. I think I'm using a different part of my brain to learn a new language. And so I think my advice for language instructors and the programs would probably be to just honestly practice patient with their students and students with their professors. It's all a new experience, especially with online and blended learning environments. It's all a new experience for everyone. And it's going to take time for students to get used to learning a language and all of the concepts that come with it in a completely new way. And I think having an understanding for that right from the get-go will take a lot of pressure off everyone. And then I think another word of advice, like I mentioned it earlier, would be availability and flexibility, to just make sure that your students know that you're available to contact. My language professor did an awesome job at that, and made everyone feel just a little less stressed, knowing that she was available and that she was also understanding through the whole uncertainty and the challenges that come with learning a new language online. Yeah, Ali.
Yeah, I think just like the one obvious thing that I think teachers can focus on is familiarity of how to use Zoom. Like we lost a pretty decent amount of time, I'd say, trying to figure out why the breakout room wasn't working, or like there were audio issues. And I get that there will always be an element of that with tech, but I think trying to minimize that would be a really good first step. Just trying to make everything flow well, flow nicely. In terms of my own experiences, my learning last semester after we went back home was all live classes but remote, and I think that those are easier to manage in a sense because you can. I think we talked about it a lot, but just increasing communication, discussion, making everyone engaged. But I think next semester I might have to do remote recorded lectures because of time zone issues, and that's very tough because like it's essentially just a lecture and it relies on the student to take notes. So I think for a recorded lecture, I think what would be a good tactic would be for teachers to have like a quiz after every class. Um, and I'm not sure if you should make it part of the grade or not, depending on the difficulty, I guess, but just kind of like a reading check and maybe make it a requirement to complete into a certain standard, but just like a reading check, meanings of words, meanings of readings, answers to reading comprehensions, thoughts in certain parts of the lecture. And then I think for hybrid learning environments, again, it's just making the most of what you have in certain situations. So I think when it's face to face, you can probably lecture more than you would be able to when you're remote, because I think when you're remote, you gotta have more discussions to keep everyone engaged. So I think it's varying it up, making sure that when you're in person, you're doing more lectures, and when you're remote, you're doing more discussions. Yeah.
So what do you hope you'll be able to say about yourselves as language learners in December of 2020? Go ahead, Ali.
I hope that I will be comfortable with a set of vocabulary that I would have been comfortable with had had the semester been in person. I think it's different also because, at least for me, um, I don't live I live in Hong Kong, but they speak Cantonese here, and so I haven't been able to like practice Mandarin speaking really since the end of school. And it's not like riding a bike for me, whereby if you like go back to it, you can remember everything. I think you do need to do quite a consistent job of speaking Mandarin in order to retain that information. So I do, and I've been trying to like use online sources to help me reading and writing. Um, but I just think that it's hard to like we always talk about quantifying fluency, and there are certain tests that you can have, but I think for me, it comes back to I'd always at the start and end of every unit make sure I could write every single word, and I think that that's like a basic goal that I can kind of set myself, is to be able to know every word in every unit by the time that the unit tests happen, and the only real person accountable for that is me. So I think that that has to be kind of student enforced, setting goals and being motivated enough to accomplish them. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, so by December, I think, as of right now, just thinking about it, I hope that I continue to grow as I've, been growing in person. I hope that I don't stop myself or hinder myself because of this or that or the other thing, but to continue to grow in learning and as a language learner, and grow in proficiency and fluency within the language. Yeah, Selena?
Yes, I agree with both of you. It's definitely, I want to learn to be very independent and forcing myself to keep up the language online. What was the other thing you just mentioned, Sarah? Just being more proficient, keeping up your proficiency. I think that's what I was thinking. And just learning how to learn a language on an online environment, especially because that's like this day and age, everything's online. And I'm hoping to be a teacher in the future too. And so I'd like to even just learn how to teach language online. And I love linguistics. So yeah.
Yeah, so any final words of advice for all of us who will be probably teaching you online and hybrid? One of my favorite things that you all have said is that we're all kind of learning together and none of us is really knowing what we're doing. And I think it's really a time that that our instructors need to show their vulnerabilities, and it's an asset. It's not anything bad. So any final words of wisdom for my colleagues out there who will be having the great privilege of teaching you online, in person, outside, wherever. Sarah?
Yeah, I fully agree with you that I think the biggest aspect is to just be open and honest with your students. we're people and we understand that you're people as well. Like, we're all humans and we're all figuring this out together. And so you don't have to have it all figured out right away. We're all trying to navigate this at the same time. So as long as you're open and honest with us, we're going to be understanding, just as we hope that you're understanding with us trying to figure it out too. Yes, Selena.
Yes, I agree. Definitely communication is the biggest thing. And I thought of something else in this summer when I was taking a course online on my teacher's syllabus. She didn't have office hours, and I didn't like that because I felt like asking for office hours was like bothering her, getting in her way, because I know we all have problems and struggles during a pandemic. So I would recommend that teachers all have a set of office hours, even if they require you to email them first, but at least you know there's a time where you're not bothering them, like they have that time set aside for you. And then the last thing is, like we talked about, I think grading. I think it's really important that the teachers are accepting, and if people need extensions because if they're working or something, I think it's important that they're honest and, like, I don't want to say easy, but like fair about that. Ali?
Yeah, I agree with what you both said. I would say the teachers to like try and focus more on the person, not the content, and when teaching. And I think that it's really hard, as we haven't like, even last semester we still had the luxury of having the first 2 months, I'd say, in person, so we didn't know who was in our class. But it's gonna be a different experience starting a full class online for many of us, because you're not gonna have that experience and that knowledge of who's in your class, who they are, how your teacher is in person. So I think I would appreciate it if teachers would like reach out to students at the beginning of every before the semester even started, and have a brief introduction, maybe even like schedule a 10-minute video call to try and get to know your students more, because I really do believe that when there is like a genuine relationship between the teacher and student, and the student can see the teacher's working hard for them and vice versa, that's when you get the most productive learning, because the student can get very motivated.
Yeah, I definitely think motivating the students is really important, especially the students that are coming into university for the first time. I think it's really important that the teachers motivate them to really study on their own and know that it's going to be a lot different than high school, and maybe encourage them. Like, they can recommend foreign language songs or movies or Netflix shows, something to get them interested and engaged in learning the language.
Anything else, Sarah?
Nope.
All right,
Yeah. No.
So I just want to close with a quote from a language teacher who I follow on Twitter, Dory CP. You're getting a shout out from me. And she wrote, "Instead of seeing myself as teaching a language, I see myself as connecting my students to communities."
I love it.
So I want to thank our wonderful panel so much. Ali, for getting up in the middle of the night. This should show all of us who are language teachers how critical language is to people. And to Selena and Sarah for joining us as well, and for giving up your time to give us your student perspective, because, you know, without learners, we don't have universities. And just to say to all of you out there struggling with the effects of the pandemic, I just want you to watch this and see that your students see you and they care about you as much as you care about them, which is really an amazing thing to take out of this, because you would not believe how much we care about you all as students. So thank you so very much, and have a great rest of your summer, and let me know how your semester goes. And Ali, when we're back on campus and we have offices and in-person stuff, please stop by my office.
Okay,
and
definitely.
I'll buy you a cup of coffee. I'll buy you a cup of terrible coffee on the Georgetown campus. And we will enjoy, I'll even take you to Saxby's. We will enjoy it so much in person.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll take you up on that.
All right. Be safe out there, and thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you
the
for
best
having
with it.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, you two. You are amazing, just amazing.
Thank you.